Welcome to an exciting video of Invincible Comics, where we can explore some of the craziest events in the Invincible comic universe. Today we were diving into the adventure of Mark and Rex going to Mohawk Mark's universe to find Angstrom Levy. But before I dive into this adventure, make sure to like and subscribe for weekly uploads. A few weeks after Mark and Angstrom fought for the third time, Mark asks Rex to try and figure out how to travel to different universes so he can find out what happened to Angstrom. Finally, at the beginning of the 108th issue, Rex figured out how to travel to different universes as Mark and Rex are preparing to go to this other universe. Eve argues with Mark about how it isn't necessary to go to this universe in search for Angstrom. In the conclusion of the argument, Eve slaps Mark. After they argue, Rex and Mark travel to the alternate universe, arriving up in space when they see 8 Viltrumite ships right above this version of Earth. Scared, they fly down into Earth. In the Sky Conquest, the Viltrumite Mark had fought twice previously and asked them to follow him to the Citadel. They follow Conquest into a reformed version of the Pentagon. Conquest leads them to a room full of Adam-Eve lookalikes and Mohawk Mark. After Mainstream Mark meets Mohawk Mark again, they have a conversation. Mohawk Mark leads Mainstream Mark and Rex to a room with a tortured and beaten Angstrom. Mohawk Mark talks about how he tried to make Angstrom help him expand his empire to other universes, but he didn't cooperate. So Mohawk Mark has scientists trying to extract the power to travel universes from Angstrom. Mainstream Mark looks sick after this and tells Mohawk Mark he didn't go there to torture or kill Angstrom. Then Mohawk Mark is baffled because he can't get a read on Mainstream Mark and is confused why he came here in the first place. Mohawk Mark then talks about when he was stranded with the other Marks, and they talked about what Angstrom said and how there were such few good Marks. Then suddenly Rex plays a sound that stuns Viltrumites. Mainstream Mark and Mohawk Mark are on the ground in pain. Rex then kills the 2 scientists in the room and then throws a bomb-looking device in Mohawk Mark's mouth. The device kills Mohawk Mark by exploding his head from the inside. Rex, relieved the device worked, he then cuts Angstrom's head clean off. Then tells Mark what he did with the noise and how if something like that enters the inner ear, it can disrupt a Viltrumite and cause them great pain. When Mark asks why Rex did this, he says, seeing Mohawk Mark, he saw Mark's potential and says only one of them can rule the Earth. Mark is then stranded in the alternate universe with the dead bodies of Angstrom Levy and Mohawk Mark. In the next issue, issue 109, Mark is in the room with Mohawk Mark and Angstrom's bodies. He is interrupted by loud banging on the door from General Craig. Mark quickly swaps clothing with Mohawk Mark and rips his hair off to give himself a mohawk. Craig then opens the door yelling. He then sees Mark and apologizes for interrupting him. Craig then asks Mark what happened. Mark then yells at him about how they killed Angstrom to halt their progress in going to other dimensions. Mark then tells Craig the mess better be cleaned up by the time he gets back. Mark then flies over to the Teen Team base where the robot of this universe is. When Mark gets there, Robot threatens to explode the whole building. Mark says he just needs Robot's help. Robot says, "How do you know my name?" Mark explains that he had never seen Robot in the form he's in currently, but Eve told him about it. Robot screams, saying Mark is lying and that he killed the Teen Team. Mark explains he is from another dimension and says if he was the original Mohawk Mark, there would be a whole army of Viltrumites outside. Robot comes to an agreement with Mark and tells him to talk about what he wants. Mark takes Robot to the Pentagon, and when Craig tries to talk to Mark points Robot in the direction of the lab. Mark then tells Craig that Robot is a scientist here to duplicate Angstrom's powers. When Mark and Robot are in the lab alone, Robot tells Mark it shouldn't be hard to finish the project as the scientists here previously were already close to finishing it. Mark asks Robot if this version of him really killed Eve, and Robot says he did and that he watched it with his own eyes. They go back to Robot's base as he then explains it will take less than a year to finish the project. The robot then tells Mark he has no reason to help him. Mark has a plan to clone his body and give it to Robot. But to do this, he has to find the Mauler twins. When he manages to track the Mauler twin down, the Mauler twin tells him that Mark tore his brother's head off, but Mark explains he is not from this dimension and needs his help with cloning a body. He brings the Mauler twin back to Robot's base to build a cloning machine to clone Mark's body and give it to Robot. Mark then makes a transmission to the Viltrumites, saying he needs to stay with Robot in order to complete the project and tells them to not go and search for him. The Mauler twin talked to Mark about how he wanted to rule the Earth until Mohawk Mark and the other Viltrumites took over. And now, the Mauler twin wants to stop the Viltrumite rule. A few weeks later, the body is ready for Robot to be swapped into. As the process is happening, the Viltrumites show up to the base, and the Mauler twin and Mark are extremely worried. Anissa says they need to send a message and forget the project. So Anissa throws a baby, and it transforms into a giant monster, destroying parts of the secret base. The process works, and Robot was in the cloned body of Mark. After realizing the process worked, Robot opens a portal for Mark to go back home. Mark flies through the portal and goes home. We then see Robot flying up to the Viltrumites, and he says that they need to stop the monster, and that it is a new dawn for the Viltrum Empire. In issue 110, we see Mark return home and see Eve again, but something worse is waiting for him.